I say part of what we're still living through, we're obviously living through George Floyd, we're living through COVID and all of, the Kia boys and, guns that can be turned into machine guns, all kinds of crazy stressors, crazy stressors on the system. But the other thing we're living through is we're living through the reaction to the left, and I mean the real left, having power for a few minutes. And I don't know where it'll settle. I don't know if this will be the start of the way back.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
We're here on the Wedge Live podcast with David Brauer. We're doing our normal David Brauer episode in an election year. Welcome to the Wedge Live podcast.
It's great to be back.
So how are you feeling about this election year? Let's take your temperature.
There's an old Steve Martin joke about how a philosopher raises his hand, and I guess I might be off screen here, but basically he raises his hand like this, where you can't tell whether it's raised or not. I don't know is the honest answer, and I think, I'm not sure most people know. If you have objective evidence somewhere, polling or, I don't know, a keen sense of ESP or whatever, but I honestly don't know. The only fact I know, I think, is that the elections office, where both elections judges, told us to expect a very light turnout. And so I don't know who that helps. Does that help the reliable vote getters? Tend to be maybe the fry people, the older, more traditional voters who come out all the time. Maybe it does. I don't know. I don't really have a good vibe. I was feeling pretty good about Soren Stevenson's chance in Ward 8, which is where I live, and I'm a Soren supporter. Now I guess I just don't know with whether the DSA thing penetrated with any undecideds, to the extent that there are any undecideds here, or maybe motivated people to come out for him or against him. I know I don't really get the mail because I voted early, and I think people know who I'm supporting, but it's a long way of saying, John, I really don't have much for your audience on this. How are you?
I don't know either. The older I get, the less I realize I know about the world.
That is a very good example of getting older. I feel the same way.
What are the big issues, David Brauer?
Well, I can just tell you from the civilians that I talk to, and by that I mean people who aren't on X or even Blue Sky. Rent control is something that I know seems to be motivating a lot of the people who are in my age group and wealth group, but are not as progressive as me. They seem to be against it. And so, for example, in Ward 8, they're concerned that Soren is for it. I definitely detect a healthy group of people who seem to respond positively to my argument that we need to elect a council that's a better check on the mayor, that essentially forces the mayor to show his work, do his work. I mean, even Fry supporters in quiet moments will tell you that the mayor is not laser focused on the details of governing the city. And so that may be a wonk-to-wonk argument. In fact, I'm sure it's a wonk-to-wonk argument, but it has made some headway with the few people I've tried to persuade here in Ward 8. I think, the other thing that's just happened, and I suppose it's always happened, but it just feels so much more acute here now, is just what I term the culture war stuff, where it doesn't really matter what the issues are. Soren is too young. I've heard that. Why hasn't he served on Click among one of the people? Yeah, I know.
That's a wonk-to-wonk issue.
That's a super wonk-to-wonk issue, but this is somebody who's a big Andrea supporter, who I consider a friend, by the way, who buttonholed me and told me I was being mean to Andrea. And so I talked a little bit about why I was not voting for Andrea, and told her a little bit about Soren. And one of her responses was basically that he hasn't really done anything. And I mentioned the guy's actually been involved in affordable housing, and he has studied these issues, and he was in the streets when many of us were just wringing our hands about what was happening after George Floyd, and we were filling buckets so that the anarchists wouldn't burn our houses. He was out being an ally, frankly, to people who I think had suffered abuse from the cops for quite a while. So I viewed those as all sort of outstanding qualifications, potential qualifications for the office. I think he's a thoughtful guy, and I think he has a good temperament too. But my point is that on some level, it becomes chemical. It feels like it's chemical. And you can talk about issues and all of that, but it's still a pretty fraught moment for the city, and a lot of people seem to be proceeding from their fears. And it's a hard one to argue with sometimes.
Yeah, in some ways, I take it as a good sign that we're not so focused on crime. The crime rate's gone down a little, but we're also so scarred by our big crime election in 2021 that maybe the polarization left over from that is lingering. And I agree with you. It's generational. We've got like 30-year-old candidates. For example, Katie Cashman in Ward 7 is like Lisa Goodman's age when she was elected in 1997, if you could believe that. And now Lisa Goodman is endorsing Scott Graham, a white guy who is like 4 years older than Lisa Goodman is right now in 2023.
He's 3 years younger than me, and I had to just say, thank God I have not grown old and thought old. But right, like an RT, Ryback, who wrote his opinion piece, which was, basically saying both sides should stop being so polarizing, it did make a really, really good point, which is, and I've covered the city, or I covered the city long enough to know this, that like people like Mark Kaplan, whose a name, again, you kind of have to be a wonk, but he became a council power from the 8th Ward. And I don't think he was 30 when he got elected. Steve Kramer served on the city council. I would be shocked if Steve was well into his 30s then. There really is not a long and storied tradition of elders being Minneapolis city council members. It's just not ever been the case. And so I am a little taken aback by people of my generation sort of pulling up the drawbridge and saying, how dare you be so young? I mean, I've watched Katie Cashman work. She is 30. I think she's exactly 30, but she's wise. She's smart. She seems vastly better temperament than Scott Graham does. And I've tried to tell some of my friends who live in Ward 7 that they really need to consider her, that she's being tarred with this DSA brush, but she's not for rent control. She would be in some councils a moderate, although as somebody, as your listeners well know, I'm somebody who bikes and walks and hates being in cars, will not advocate policies that will try to increase my chances of dying on Minneapolis streets. I mean, she's a good urbanist I think in the best sense of the word. And if you're looking at age, do you want the guy who looks like his head's about to fly off his neck and, tries to tar her with this crazy DSA stuff and just seems really intemperate? Or do you want her?
I don't know if Scott Graham is angry. I don't know, but it's like constantly red-faced. And like, I watch a lot of candidate forums, and like, it's the first time I thought, like, is he going to be okay at the end of this? Like, I don't know if it's anger
Right.
exactly or what.
Yes, we should not discriminate against people who are quick to show their complexions. It's Scott does flush easily, and I am an extremely white person myself, so I know what that's like. But Something you said earlier, I didn't want to just blow past about the public safety election. You're right that I don't think that issue, I think that issue probably animates a lot of voters who are already animated. But, and I know I get the All of Minneapolis emails, the group that's the Fry's Praetorian Guard. And, they've tried to make that an issue, which I think is mostly a call to their people, trying to get their people interested. I don't hear it a lot in the discussions I'm having around the 8th Ward at all. Maybe that is progress, or maybe everybody's thrown up their hands. I know that, one of the things I think that is definitely going on here is with everybody seems to be, especially the Fry side, seems to be operating from the paradigm that this will be an election where it'll be tough to get people to show up. And so I think a lot of the issues that they're seizing on are issues to try to, again, get that chemical reaction. The DSA thing, where guys like Jacob Hill and Joe Radinovich, bravely claim that they're suddenly going to be nonpartisan now. Those things make me smile. But they are an attempt to try to get people's blood up, to get people going. And I mentioned on, I guess we have to call it X now, the other day, that I think this is also something that the Star Tribune, obviously their opinion page, is complicit in trying to make sure that whatever these differences are exacerbated and heightened. And it's just a way to kind of juice people to try to get them to the polls. And I don't know if it'll work. The fact that they have to do it indicates they're not sure. So.
Right. I have an unconfirmed theory about 2021 that like the extra turnout, I believe more people voting is good, especially in local elections. But I wondered if the number of people voting in 2021 was bad because it was just a lot of people influenced by 30 seconds they saw on TV without any context. And there's a lot of bad information floating around, whether it's local news or on TV. And so actually high turnout in 21 was bad because it had a lot of like mostly disengaged people voting for the wrong reasons or things they were misinformed about. And so maybe it's a good thing that lower turnout this year is a good thing. I don't know. That's probably a wrong thing to say morally.
Yeah, it'll be taken. It'll be in a all of Minneapolis attack ad soon. I don't subscribe to your theory. I actually think people, rightly or wrongly, were highly motivated to vote in 2021 because there were a lot of things, frankly, to vote on. This was a chance for everybody to register their vibe from what happened after George Floyd. And we obviously are a little more skeptical about the Minneapolis Police Department than some of the voters in the city. But there was a very real fear that if not defunded completely, that there would be that something bad would happen with the size of the police force, and it would lead to more of the chaos that we'd seen in the last 2 years. I think that's proven not to be true. Thankfully, we were right. But I can't really blame people for being animated in that way. Maybe the truest test of whether we've settled out or we are in the process of settling out will come 2 years from now when there's another mayor's race. We'll see if the left can find a challenger. I don't think a lot of people think Fry will run again, but there'll be somebody from that wing. And in 2021, God bless Sheila and Kate. They were awesome for stepping up, like a lot of council candidates have done this year. But they weren't lavishly funded. They got started either late or with a lot less money and with very rudimentary political organizations. They did really well with what they had, but we aren't talking about somebody, say, a progressive with some name recognition from the legislative delegation or the Hennepin County delegation. And it'll be interesting to see whether politicians to the left of Fry, which includes most of our legislative delegation and I think most of our Hennepin County commissioners, decide that the city of Minneapolis mayor's job is something they want to do. I did hear that, one of the reasons legislators didn't step forward in 2021 was that it's a terrible job and nobody wants to do it, but we'll see.
I mean, now it's got all that power.
It does.
Is that an enticement?
It's got power, it's got pay. The problem, of course, and the reason that the people who are pushing the strong mayor amendment wanted it was because it takes a pretty big campaign to be elected mayor. You're going to be facing Vance Opperman, Wyzetta money, a lot more than this year in 2025. There's going to be a ton of money to get through. Now, I am still of the opinion that Minneapolis can be organized well. It can be motivated well. Betsy Hodges' win feels like a different era now, but it's not so long ago that that sort of effort couldn't be replicated. I've chosen to believe, although there is no electoral evidence of it at the moment, that there is a sort of a deep fry fatigue, and people will want to move on to something. If there's a candidate, be it I'm pulling Katie Cashman just because we've talked about her, but Soren actually would be an okay example in terms of temperament. Somebody who runs as somebody who can do the best job of bringing people together and listening and not being a top-down guy, and not looking to press a intra-partisan advantage at every turn. I think that person might have a chance if they're more progressive than the current mayor, but maybe I'm wish casting. I don't know.
Do you think the mayor's injected this third precinct issue into the world to try to influence the election, make public safety a big flashpoint again, or what?
That's a good question. I've wrestled with that one.
It's sat for years, and it seems like it's just sped up really fast ahead of the election.
Again, I got to admit what I don't know, which is I don't live in the third precinct. I've talked to a lot of people about the third precinct. The timing, as you've noted, way more than anybody, is so weird that you're hurrying this up right before the election that it would seem to indicate what I would buy your thesis on that. But the thing that kind of counters it in my mind are a couple of things. One is I really don't sense the groundswell. I know Latricia Vitaw says the average person really wants a third precinct in the third precinct. I just don't feel that vibe. And the fact that Emily Koski, who is a better behaved part of Mayor Fry's coalition, is teaming up with Jason Chavez to basically slow the mayor's roll, actually do the sort of thing I want to see the city council do, which is say, we're not going to roll over for you. You're going to have to show your work. We're going to have to prove it. That indicates to me that there may be limited resonance. I mean, my God, if Emily represents the 11th ward, it's well-heeled generally, and the sort of people that are more likely than not, I think, to vote for Jacob Fry. And if she's saying slow down, that's an interesting data point. I do think the third precinct is a pretty good example of how poorly Minneapolis is served right now. I mean, the fact that the mayor is in the stupid survey that only gave people two choices, neither of which really came from the community at all, and really didn't have much legitimacy, which I think they're finding now. I mean, that's an example of frankly, the mayor's office running things poorly. But I mean, I'm just encouraging people when they think about where or whether the third precinct should go to think about, like, we're going to be building that thing for what, 3 years, probably, maybe 4. I haven't looked at the pro formas, but can you imagine just how much of a headache it's going to be to build this thing wherever it is? Lake Street seems out because the optics of that are terrible, and we know Mayor Fry cares about the optics. 2600 Hiawatha is close to Little Earth, and you're going to have a construction site for 3 years with God knows what chicanery will go on, what protests, what demonstrations. I mean, I don't feel like we haven't gotten good data on how bad the response is in the third precinct without the building. But I also would just ask people, should we think about a more creative way to police? Do we need a big precinct building where all the cops are? Do we need a central point of focus for demonstrations and all that? Is there a way to distribute your policing resources and make it work for the city that we have in 2023, as opposed to some city that, we used to have when we had 5 precincts?
So you brought up the R.T. Ryback opinion piece in the Star Tribune, and I saw the headline and I was prepared to hate it and think it was stupid, but then I read it and I kind of agree with it. I want to read a section from it, a couple of paragraphs. Minneapolis voters should beware block politics, not new voices. So he's talking about his time as, what, like 30 years ago?
Yeah, given the names that he mentioned, yeah, I would say that's right. 30, even 40 years ago, because I think I was a young reporter for some of those people.
The people the establishment was worried about back then included Sharon Sales Belton, Peter McLaughlin, Kathy O'Brien, Brian Coyle, Jane Ranum,
Yeah.
Gene Wagenia, Steve Kramer. In other words, people who over the subsequent decades would make some of the most extraordinary contributions of any group of elected officials in Minneapolis history. Here's where the sounds familiar part comes in. As this year's city elections get closer, there is again great concern about young progressives making massive change. Having seen parts of this movie before, I caution people to keep their minds open, because behind some of the walls going up, there may be some younger, important new leaders with the fresh perspective our city needs right now. I also want to caution those young progressives not to write off everyone who opposes you now. Some of them know enough about what has or hasn't worked to help you build a future that avoids the mistakes of the past. So I have seen polarization ramping up. I know I only go back 10 years in the city, but even over that period, I've seen it, I think. And I feel like Scott Graham, we keep talking about Ward 7, but I think it's a great example of this because I think Scott Graham is a uniquely bad candidate in the city. I've got my problems with somebody like Luther Ranheim, but I don't see positives for Scott Graham. He's basically coasting on the fact that he's got the Goodman endorsement and has adopted basically all of her positions in her constituency and her donors. But I think the polarization can lift up really bad candidates, which is bad.
So I would say from a 44-year vantage point that there have been councils that I've covered that were more dysfunctional than what we're seeing right now. I remember when Tony Scallon and Steve Kramer and Brian Coyle and Barbara Carlson were on the council. There were factions and fights and big personalities that are way more, like Latricia Vitaw plus. What I don't remember being as true, and I might not go back quite far enough, is I don't remember that polarization being the ideological gap being quite so wide. There were the occasional Republicans still when I was covering the council. There were independents who were really Republicans. I think what's changed now is that there are more real lefties who have a shot at power. That was certainly what was different about 2017 when the Lisa Bender Council came in, or 2013, even when Betsy Hodges won. I wasn't around for Art Naftalin, but Betsy was really the most progressive mayor we've had, and even she got caught up in the 4th precinct demonstration, so lost a lot of support to her left. She was a more moderate council member, but very progressive for the time. The council in 2017 that Lisa Bender was council president of was the most progressive council that I've covered. It absolutely was. 2040 plan, all of that stuff. Absolutely. And what at the time I hoped was going to be, just sort of a natural ascendancy. The progressive young left comes up and the Carol Becker right recedes. I've been fighting with the Carol Becker part of the party for 20 years. And I thought, well, their time's done. They're just getting old and tired, and here come the new people. And then, I'll never forget just wandering in randomly must have been January, maybe December of 2017, January of 2018, into the Egg and I, the late lamented Egg and I, and Lisa Bender and Andrea Jenkins were having a very focused, intense meeting. And Andrea had just won office, and I voted for her. She was Elizabeth Glidden's aide. Elizabeth Glidden was a good progressive, did good work. But the vibe was very much not what I expected. And I tried not to make it too awkward. They saw me. I was, still a journalist, sort of then. I realized, what was going on at that moment and probably moments before was that, Andrea really was a representative of the not that progressive part of the council, the other faction as it ended up emerging. And I guess I look at it now, I make myself the main character. I look at it now as sort of the realization for me anyway, that there was going to be this big split and there was going to be this rear guard action to try to undo the ascendant progressive faction. So, and that's what happened. And of course, they took back the council in 2021 with Andrea as the president. So when I look at things now, I say part of what we're still living through, we're obviously living through George Floyd, we're living through COVID and all of, the Kia boys and, guns that can be turned into machine guns, all kinds of crazy stressors, crazy stressors on the system. But the other thing we're living through is we're living through the reaction to the left, and I mean the real left, having power for a few minutes. And I don't know where it'll settle. I don't know if this will be the start of the way back. I don't know if an effort like Minneapolis for the Many, which is sort of a lefty progressive response to all of Minneapolis, whether that's going to be a building block for 2025. I think they probably hope it is, or whether it's just a belated recognition that we need to do something like that in 2021 and maybe it peters out. So
the thing about the reaction, and I agree that what we're seeing is kind of a reaction to the 2017 class, is that was kind of like the technocratic progressive left, not very ideological. I felt very well represented by that class of council members. I don't really feel like I have a home in Minneapolis politics anymore. No more. Does a Aureen, does a
I
really like Aureen so I'm not like a member of the DSA. Like I have a lot of friends who are in the DSA, and so I don't like agree with the strongest possible version of rent control, which is like kind of a litmus test if you're running as a progressive candidate in the city. And so so what I'm trying to say is I don't think we had they weren't out of their minds way far to the left in 2017.
No, that's right.
It would have been a nice place for the city to settle, and it's easy for me to say because I agreed with them, but feels like the conservative side has gotten further to the right, the left has gotten further to the left, and that's why they can't come together. But if we hadn't been interrupted by COVID and the murder of George Floyd and just crime politics nonstop, maybe we would have settled comfortably in that place and maybe had a slow trajectory towards progress instead of something so abrupt.
Well, there's no doubt that the younger, truly progressive, socialist, if not DSA, way more multiracial group of people were not super well represented in 2017 in the class, although, but they were going to have to be heard from. And one of the things that I think in hindsight is really obvious is where Betsy Hodges ran into trouble in the 4th district, the 4th precinct. The people who were doing the protest, who were putting their asses on the line, were the people who were out there, and they were never going to support Betsy. They all became part of the Ray Dean team, and we went from there. So it's the difference between a Cam Gordon, who's of my generation, and a Robin Wansley. I happen to think Robin speaks for a lot of people in town. And I think one of the things people sometimes look past when they're analyzing Robin is her ward, the 2nd ward, especially the redistricted 2nd ward, is super liberal, super lefty. She's an accurate representative of who they are there. And it's okay, it's all right. One of the other things that that can confound people like us is DSA people are true believers. They are, frankly, putting up a lot of the bodies for candidates this time where the more technocratic left, maybe like me or maybe like you, are not. Like they're actually showing up. They're organizing things like Minneapolis for the Many. They're going out and door knocking. I can criticize them, I guess, not necessarily for what I think they meant with their statement about Palestine, but for the absolute electoral tin-earedness of it. And there's a lot of pressure in Minneapolis. A lot of people in Minneapolis come from grassroots empowered movements that don't necessarily interface well with elections and electoral politics and don't necessarily want to. If you hear people talking about in the DSA criticizing the politics of respectability to keep you from advocating for things that are really true and that really help the oppressed, that's fine. But the politics of respectability are part of one of the things you kind of have to navigate. You have to surf when you're trying to win elections in most wards, and certainly in enough wards to be able to hold Jacob Fry accountable. So it's a little bit of a mess, only in that the left is just chronically less organized, and I would argue more diverse sometimes than a business interest that's able to meet over Vance Opperman's checkbook or sign up for the Jonathan Weinhagen, Steve Kramer program. And maybe to a certain extent the left is deciding how left it is, and hopefully we'll figure out a way to have a program that appeals to the majority of people, at least the majority of people who vote, and make sure enough new people vote that it'll be successful. I mean, I do see some glimmers. I mean, I don't think, for example, municipal snow plowing on a citywide basis is achievable in this world. It's a laudable goal, but I don't think it's achievable in this world. Others will disagree with me. I do think starting the discussion from that point and saying, especially people my age who are only getting older, have to navigate city streets, and we've got this weird libertarian shovel it or don't system. That doesn't work. That's crazy. That's a basic public service that we should have. So I feel like I really appreciate people to my left for pushing issues like that, forcing me to think, forcing us to grapple with something that I don't think we have ever considered, or not seriously considered, at least as long as I've been here. So hopefully that sort of process where there's hopefully more vitality coming from the left side can translate into policies that can translate into vibes, that can translate into votes.
So is this about uniting the faction that elected the 2017, the multiple factions that elected that 2017 council, the left and the more technocratic middle left? Is that what we're trying to do?
I don't know that. That just sounds so fatuous to even say that I can't stomach it. I can't choke it down. Obviously you got to bring together people on issues to make them happen. I don't think it has to be universal. I don't think we're going to agree on everything. I think one of the things that, really you got to think about is what's right for each ward. I mean, if you're coming at it from the standpoint that you've got cookie cutter left positions, and I shouldn't say cookie cutter, that you've got a left program, a left portfolio that's going to work as well to get somebody elected in Jason Chavez's ward as it is in Katie Cashman's ward, I think that's insane. I just don't think that works. I think the job is to try to find somebody who's as truly progressive, truly urbanist, truly, mature and able to forge a good policy in every ward differently. So that requires a lot of thinking when you're trying to thread a left needle. And I'm hoping that at least coalitions can be built. What I'd love to see on the next council, we'll see, is I don't necessarily want to see like 9-4 votes on everything or 8-5 votes. I'd like to see votes where there are actual shifting coalitions as legitimate ward interests are different. As long as we're going to have the council be a council of different wards, I just like to see people be more independent. It feels like right now, especially on the right, we spend a lot of time blowbagging about the left, but on the right, it's just a lockstep. And as I wrote on X recently, lefties brought the sidewalk plowing plan. They had an aggressive plan. Maybe it's a good idea, I don't know. But they were willing to compromise. Like it ran into resistance, and they were ready to deal, and they ran into people who said, "We're not going to deal." Rent control, another example where I think I don't agree with 3%, and I think that the working group that came up with basically the 55% that came up for the more strict proposal and called it consensus. It's not consensus. It was a bare majority, and there were two widely divergent views, and I really don't think any of it, frankly, should have carried the day. But they were willing, I think, even with that policy that the task force nominally agreed to, they were still willing to talk and willing to compromise. And Andrea Jenkins, among other people on the right, basically said, nope, nothing. We're going to shunt it off and we're not going to consider anything. My offer, as Al Pacino said in The Godfather, is nothing. So far, it's worked for them. I think the only way that it will stop working for the Fry guys and people like that is if they lose. And I don't know if this will be the time that they lose or not.
To take it back to the previous council class again, which I always do, is things like the 2040 plan passed 12-1. Paul Masano was the only no vote on the 2040 plan. On Transportation Action Plan, also like a huge deal, as everyone is maybe realizing now, Goodman was the only no vote on that. A lot of big stuff passed with close to unanimous votes.
As a result of frankly, some deal making behind the scenes. Those were not pure proposals. Those were the work of a lot of negotiation. And I do think, again, for people like me, especially, who are worried about dying on the streets of Minneapolis on our bike, one of the things that really concerns me about this election, and I think it is a trend, and it really should motivate people who feel like I do to vote, is we are starting to creep up, I think, on the anti-multimodal council. I don't think we're there yet, but it seems like Scott Graham is very finely tuned to what his rich constituents hate, and they hate an all-day bus lane on Hennepin Avenue, so he's running with it. I haven't had a chance to watch your podcast or listen to your podcast with Kate Mortensen, so maybe you can tell me now. But she has run on the Bryant Avenue bike lane, the backlash to the Bryant bike lane. Now, maybe she moderated it when she was on a bike with you, but I am really worried that we're going to have somebody there who is going to be more willing to demagogue bike lanes. I mean, the more those people we get on the council, we do start to get into a point where when this mayor is no longer mayor, who knows who the next mayor is going to be? It could be a really big problem.
That episode has not aired yet. It may come out after this one. She did try to moderate, and I told her, like, it's a huge red flag for you to use a phrase like social engineering, because all infrastructure is social engineering. The thing that allows us to drive our cars places is the roads, and the thing that will allow us to ride bikes more places is that we create infrastructure that allows it. So I don't know, like, she came out in support of traffic enforcement by camera, like changing the state law to do that. She seems very skeptical that changing the design of our streets is a way to make them safer. I think she supports having the bike path on Bryant, and she's taking more of a, like, I would have led better on this issue, so they're going back and redoing parts of the street. They're making these fixes for fire trucks and like driveways and stuff like that. So her position is that she would have led better on that, so that they wouldn't have had to go and do that. It's kind of a nuanced complaint, but also, like, I don't think she gets it on, like, redesigning our streets fundamentally. And Chris Meyer said he had a conversation with her where she wouldn't commit to, like, not going back on the parking minimums thing.
I think Kate's a good example of somebody who could win. We haven't really talked much about that race. I don't know how Ward 13 is going to go, but I do know that there's a ton of Kate Mortensen long signs in places around the part of the 13th. My dad lives in the 13th. And she does appear to be successful in, I would say personally, demagoguing the problems that come up with the city. My take on the Bryant bike lane, I had somebody who is leftier than me and works harder at getting the left elected in Minneapolis, who lives on Bryant, not the part that just got done, but the part that's been done. And this person told me, yeah, they botched it. It just doesn't work. There's basically no wiggle room in case drivers do stupid driver things. And this person wasn't bitter, but they were like, it didn't work and something needs to be fixed. Okay, fine. It's the first time the city had done something like that, really. And we have so little chill in this city right now that people cannot accept the idea that new things might not work the first time, but we can learn from them. And I think the second part of the Bryant bike lane, which I've used as much of as I can, is fine, is good. It works. If it works for the city and it works for the homeowners, awesome. We learn, we iterate, we do things. Again, I would like to get back to a council that doesn't do kumbaya, and a mayor who doesn't do kumbaya when things are really messed up. Like, I don't want people saying we're going to heal violence with straight up vibes. But I do want people in elective office who can say, you know what? Public Works messed up. Oh, Public Works, you admitted messing up. Let's try to do it better the next time. And we just don't have the leadership like that right now. We don't trust Jacob Fry because he hadn't earned our trust. Jacob Fry fears us because that's how he's wired. And I just wish we could get past that to say, the Bryan Avenue thing, once it gets fixed for everybody, it'll get fixed, is a really good thing. Like, my dad lives in one of the senior homes on Bryan Avenue, and he's out there, and so are other people in there. He's 95. He's out there in his damn, little motorized chair going up and down the bike lanes with a lot of other people there, seniors, having a great time. I mean, maybe I hope I'm never biking through like Fred Armiston on Portlandia and get all mad at the seniors out there, going slow when I'm trying to go 15. But honestly, it's wonderful. Like, it works. Was it perfect? No. But now do we have something that's in place that can be made better and will make this city better for at least as long as the concrete or whatever they've ever poured there holds out? Yes. And that's a really cool, neat, wonderful thing for the city. It's why I love living here. I bring people in here from out of town. There's bad stuff. They know about the bad stuff. But like biking, it could be made a lot better, but we're so much better than other places. And it's such a good feeling. And honestly, I've had a version of that feeling in Minneapolis since I moved here in 1979. Like, even with all the crap, even with some of the things that have gotten worse, that vibe, that thing, that feeling that comes from all different things is just, it's magical. I wish we had peacemakers and progress makers who could get through to people.
So before we go too long here, let's get to the endorsements. People want David Brauer's endorsements. Have you made endorsements?
I have not.
Oh, are you going to make endorsements?
Sure, let's do it. Just throw out the races, and I'll tell you.
Okay, let's go in reverse since we've been talking about Bryan Avenue and the 13th Ward. And you raise a good point. That's really the sticking point for me. I don't think I'm going to endorse in Ward 13. I don't know. Maybe I will. But the transportation thing is the split. And Paul Masano voted for the Transportation Action Plan. She did not raise hell in demagogue Bryan Avenue, which I think is commendable coming from me as someone who doesn't particularly care for Linnea Palmisano. I can give her credit for mentioning reducing vehicle miles traveled in a candidate forum, for example. And Kate Mortensen has said some things that I don't agree with. The social engineering thing, that's a red flag for me. And so what do you think?
Oh, this is a tough one right from the start. I've gone back and forth. Here's where I am today, even though you know what my self-interest is, in which would swing me toward Linnea. I have to say that one of the more compelling things about Kate is she is not on Team Fry, like really not on Team. Right. There's not a lot of love lost there, and I think I've heard people, like I believe Chris has said this, maybe Mike Norton too, who have said, she's worse on transportation. She's better on police accountability and some of the stuff like that. And even though transportation is one of my pet issues, I think I have to opt for somebody who is not so tied to Jacob Fry. So I'd probably vote for Kate. I would hate voting for either one, but that's probably who I'd vote for right now.
Okay. Ward 12, we have
Just feel-
Aureen Chowdhury and Luther Ranheim. Those are the two viable candidates. There's a similar, well, it's not similar as to Ward 13, but the transportation is a big split there too. Luther Ranheim told a group of landlords he wants to defund the city's bike infrastructure, but told me in a podcast episode that he actually thinks bike lanes are great and we can do more. So it depends which Luther you believe there. Aureen is very progressive. Is she DSA endorsed? She's among that
She
crowd,
is,
right?
yeah.
I
Yeah,
like her.
the-
She's taking this very seriously, working hard, obviously very prepared at forums, worked at City Hall for a couple of council members. What do you think?
Yeah, she definitely meets the person my age in my ward who is mad at Soren for not having been on Click. She meets the Click test in terms of working at City Hall. I think she's great. I think she fits the ward. People really don't realize that how progressive Ward 12 has become. It's also, by the way, a very high turnout ward now. So you need to get people inspired in Ward 12 to come out and vote in the next citywide election. I think that's a no-brainer choice. Aureen would be my choice. No problem.
That is not hard at all. That's not hard.
Nope, that's
Ward
an easy
8 is
one.
where David Brauer lives. So you mentioned Andrea Jenkins meeting with Lisa Bender long ago when she was first elected. Was that ideological, that split from the beginning, or did she just want to be council president? Because what I've noticed about her is that she's not very engaged, and like she's often surprised when at council meetings when all the other council members seem to be on the same page voting for something, and she's like, I had no idea this was happening. I didn't know there can't be consensus here because I'm not on board. Which so is she interested in the job, or did she just want the job? I agree with some of her positions. Like on the surface, she seems fairly middle of the road progressive type. But was ideology the split from the beginning in 2017?
I mean, I've talked to some people about this over the years, and the general sense I've gotten from people is that, Andrea did a great job, I thought, as Elizabeth's council aide. Elizabeth Liddon ran a very responsive office. Andrea was great, knowledgeable, totally qualified for the office she was running for. And I think it was natural, given that I've known like council aides forever who have become council members or legislators, somebody like Scott Dibble, who was an aide for 11th Ward council member Doré Mead. It just seemed natural. But I have had people say that she is more conservative. I would not call her a big C conservative by any means, but that she was more conservative than Elizabeth, and that has gradually been more reflected. I agree with you on the sense of I've been surprised at how loose a grasp she seems to have of power at times. I was disappointed, I guess, that grandfatherly disappointment that when she was for rent control, she's been for some version of it. When the Muslim council members were absent on Eid and the vote went ahead anyway, Andrea's explanation was, well, they should have sort of known and seen that coming, which I actually think is true. But she's the council president. She was in her vote. She was on their side. She could have and should have done more to stop that, to help her colleagues, if not for fairness, whether she agreed with rent control or not, for politics, because she was theoretically for this. It's probable she wasn't really for it, and so
Right.
she didn't do anything. But it's just that sense of things. Andrea's complained a lot about things happening to her, which I understand. She's a pioneer. She's taken a lot of arrows for stuff. But that's a way of kind of shucking responsibility for some of her votes, or at least some of her actions. And the other thing is, I think that she's been, we had a homeless encampment in King Park during the George Floyd aftermath. It was one of the groups that split off from the Sheraton Hotel, which, became overrun and is still shut down over by Midtown Exchange. a lot of those people trying to be safe came over to King Park. Some friends over here worked really, really hard to make sure that the people who were living there were taken care of. And basically, they described to me trying to meet with Andrea and kind of getting chewed out because they were a public safety threat, and there was prostitution in the park. Absolutely. There was drug use in the park. Absolutely. There were people who were trying to survive. Absolutely. I didn't see any problems, and I live a couple blocks away from the park. And to have a council member who's kind of looking at volunteers and making them feel bad, trying to get coats for them and gloves, I don't know where that comes from, frankly, but that's not the kind of attitude that I want from my council members. So it's one of the reasons I'm supporting Soren. He's to the left of me on a couple of things. But again, if I have to choose between somebody who can foment a serious oversight role versus the mayor and ask good questions and not be beholden to Vance Opperman and all of Minneapolis's money, I'm going to err on the side of Soren. And so that's why I'm supporting Soren.
As we go through these, we're only doing a handful. And the ones that all of Minneapolis, the Chamber of Commerce style PAC that's dumping hundreds of thousands of money on the election are focused on are 7, 8, and 12. So 7 is next.
Katie Cashman's easy.
Scott Graham is terrible. If you want my thoughts on Scott Graham, he's a bleak candidate in Ward 7. Go to wedgelive.com and read my thoughts there. Yeah,
I guess he's a longtime DFL guy. I haven't spent a whole lot of time at that level of the party, but Margaret Kelleher is a friend of my family's, and I've known Margaret for a long time, and I like Margaret as a person a lot. I like her family, but there are people in that ward, people like Susan Lenfesty, who's a wealthy East Isles, Kenwood person about town, and who really seem to have her ear, the mayor's ear. I guess there is I shouldn't say sort of, there's a sincere concern that if you take parking away from those businesses on Hennepin Avenue, that they'll suffer, and that they're already worried about the businesses suffering even without that parking. But again, I choose to believe that that there may be some transition costs. And that's easy for me to say. Your business might suffer and might not survive. But creating transit on Hennepin, first of all, is the only way to get enough capacity on Hennepin for Hennepin to work. It doesn't happen this year. It's going to happen in the future because you cannot make that street wide enough to make cars move through there. You just can't. And of course, as you've talked about, demagoguing bike lanes for the lack of parking when it's really bus lanes for parking is a thing. So anyway, I say renters in Ward 7 rise up and claim your rightful council member, and homeowners who are cool and who get it, pick Katie because she is the future.
Watch a candidate for him or both, because
I've told
the
people,
difference,
yes,
it's wide.
Sorry. Yes, and in fact, go to Wedge Live if you want to see some links to that Ward 7 candidate forum. I think it was the League of Women Voters forum.
Yeah, they did 2 of them.
Yeah, so you should definitely watch. Even I think if you watch 5 minutes, you'll see the difference.
Ward 6, we have incumbent Jamal Osman, Tiger Warku, Casey Muggin, the 2 challengers. What do you think?
Yeah, Casey's my guy. I was impressed with the work he did on the Charter Commission. He was a very fair, I think, parceler outer of redistricting. He's been a fraud investigator for Minneapolis Attorney General, who endorsed his opponent, the incumbent Jamal Osman. Osman definitely is fine on some things. Definitely, you don't quite know where he's going to come. He could be considered sort of part of the middle there. He was the one that basically sold his nonprofit to what became the shell of Feeding Our Future. His wife's nonprofit was just attempting to be shut down by Keith Ellison. Neither one of the Osmonds have been criminally charged, so we should make sure to say that. I also think Casey was fairly brave in finding a challenger for Omar Fateh, who is a socialist legislator from my Senate district, but who was tied up in some ballot harvesting shenanigans, again, never charged, but people in his campaign were. And Casey took some grief and is still, frankly, taking some grief within the Somali community for really saying that was wrong and that Omar should be held accountable. And I respect that stance. So I'd rank him first. I'd rank Jamal second. Tiger Worku has I don't know him, but he has a long record of very fractious dealings as a neighborhood group chair. I think he's also been accused credibly of deep shenanigans with delegates, and I just wouldn't go there.
Yeah, the thing with Jamal Osman, the swirling corruption around Jamal Osman gives me pause. Although he answered the More Neighbors candidate questionnaire, good answers on housing. He's cast some good votes. As you say, he's in the middle. But I don't know why the Attorney General, who is shutting down his wife's nonprofit, would have endorsed him a month ago. Like, are you not aware of these things, Keith Ellison? That was kind of odd.
It was, and Keith has made some interesting endorsements. He endorsed Michael Rainville right from the jump in Ward 3, not that there was a strong opponent there. I always think some of Keith's endorsements may have something to do with trying to help Jeremiah in Ward 5. We haven't really talked about that race, but I think Victor Martinez has a great chance of breaking through.
Yeah.
And Victor Martinez is the Trump voting pastor who claims he can find common ground with LGBTQIA plus people, even when he disagrees with their lifestyle. Pro-life, admittedly so. There's a whole lot of liberals in Southwest Minneapolis who are supporting that guy, and I think it's wrong. And so, if Jeremiah loses, even if some of the other candidates break through, even some of the surprising candidates break through on the progressive side, it's going to be real tough. It'd be real tough to even have a majority. And I worry about that because it's such a low turnout ward, and I think Victor's supporters are highly motivated.
That would be a heartbreaker in Ward 5. I also had that thought about the Ellison family making peace with the Fry side of the council with some of these endorsements because they're weird.
Well, keep in mind, too, Keith Ellison wants to be something other than Attorney General. So some of this stuff is strategic just for Keith. But I will say it again. Some of his endorsements leave me scratching my head, and I put less stock in them than I do from other politicians who endorse.
Well, that's all I have aside from recommendations. Is there anything that we have not covered that you think we should talk about here?
Oh, I'm sure there's tons of stuff, but I've already filibustered quite a bit here. The nice thing about these elections is no matter how they go, in 2 years there'll be new ones.
Yeah.
The other thing that just put people's heads that they'll want to get out as soon as I say it is there'll be Hennepin County elections. We haven't really talked about the one Hennepin County election because it's not in Minneapolis, but old friend of Wedge Live, Alicia Gibson, is running, formerly of the Wedge, right? You see your Wedge?
Yeah, the historic
formerly
district.
of the Wedge is now, I think, has found a rightful place in Edina, and is now running. And I don't know who's going to win out there.
Does she have an opponent? I haven't been following it at all.
Oh, totally. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, and I don't want to get it wrong, but. Mary Moriarty's partner, who's a Hopkins School Board member, is running. I apologize for forgetting your name in the moment, but she's running, Alicia's running, and Dario Anselmo, who's one of the Republican business owner, used to own the Fine Line, big guy who said Steve Fletcher was, causing crime throughout the city, is running. And the way I look at this, I don't know really much about Jen, who I believe is Mary's partner, but Alicia did not impress me in her run for the council, and Dario is, he's a more moderate Republican, but the crime all the time stuff is never going to win me over. So maybe that's what I'll leave you with, is just watch that race on election night. It's only one seat, and the Hennepin County Board is really good right now, but
Right.
It may be the start of something big. In fact, every other unit of government, legislative delegation, Hennepin County, both way better than the city council. So at least take some hope from that.
So for different reasons, much like for Victor Martinez, I can't imagine a world where Alicia Gibson gets elected to a position
Yeah,
of power.
I just don't know. I don't know how the Edina West Metro mind works. It seems a little weird to show up in Edina and run for office the same year, but I don't know that I see a 500-pound gorilla. Dario almost won the last time the race was run. Chris Tondres won and has since stepped down to do other things. So maybe he's the favorite, but it's a progressive district. I believe Dario is pro-choice, so that helps him. And he came so close that maybe he's the favorite. I don't. I'm way out of my expertise.
I think Barb Johnson endorses Republicans for county commissioner, and Dario Anselmo has gotten the Barb Johnson endorsement in the past, I think.
This does not surprise me, although it must have come as a blow to Alicia to not get that.
So I mean, in the past, I don't know how Barb Johnson is weighted
I
this
see.
time. So
I see.
Alicia may still be in the running for the Barb Johnson endorsement. Okay,
it's flying so far under the radar, but maybe that just seems that way from Minneapolis. So when we're talking about races that you got to kind of slap the vein to find a pulse, maybe that Hennepin County board race is also one.
So injecting Mary Moriarty's spouse into a race for
Partner.
office.
I don't think spouse. I was corrected on that. I think it might be it's partner, maybe a better term.
Partner. It feels like a recipe for just awful politics. So I'm glad I don't have to care about that one.
Yeah, it's. I mean, she's offered to recuse, and so, but that's a big area. I mean, Mary has her own election certificate, but the budget flows through the council, so through the board. So it is a big deal. It's messy, and people like Ryan Winkler, who lost to Mary Moriarty, are making big hay out of that. Not that Ryan's bitter at all. So yeah, no, there's again. I maybe if I'm forgetting a candidate, I apologize because those are the only three that I've noticed. But there doesn't seem to be anybody there where you're going, hey, yeah, let's go.
I should read a newspaper because it feels like I should know about these things.
Get off Twitter and just like figure stuff out. I know just enough to be like scary, but you asked me on the podcast, so this is perhaps your fault for having a semi-informed person.
I think the problem is I don't read enough tweets anymore. I post tweets and I'm not reading enough.
Well, that's not the worst. That's not the worst idea for using social media right now. I'm posting less, at least about fractious stuff, because people buttonhole me and tell me how mean I am to our incumbent council member, and I have feelings. I wound. I get hurt. So.
Yeah, did you see the video of Kate Mortens and I riding up to Soren Stevenson? Someone accused me of setting that up. That was scripted.
See, here's how dumb I am. That never crossed my mind. My first thought was, hey, Soren, walk your dog in the 8th ward, man. Don't walk your dog in the 13th ward. Walk him in the 8th ward. Like that's where. No, but so it was cute. It was a cute moment.
So I clicked through to the person's profile who was accusing me of setting it up and scripting it. And yes. The person's other conspiracy theory is that Soren does not live in Ward 8. So I think it's just a disgruntled Andrea Jenkins supporter.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of emo on both sides, but definitely on among the Jenkins supporters. And that may be because they feel like she's in real trouble. And again, I have no way of knowing. I can tell you, marginally, it seems like the lawn signs are maybe marginally more Soren than her, but that just measures intensity at best. It doesn't really measure who's going to vote. She really does have a reservoir of goodwill here, but walk your dog in Ward 8, Soren. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Recommendations, David Brauer. Do you have any new hobbies, entertainment that you're enjoying, places to walk or ride your bike? What would make another person happy? What are you doing that you think would make other people happy?
Okay, TV. I would say if you're any kind of a Star Trek fan and you haven't watched Star Trek Lower Decks because it's a cartoon, it's absolutely one of the best things on TV if you're in the Star Trek mode of viewing. It's just delightful. It gives me pleasure. The season's just wrapping up, but if you haven't started it, you've got, I think, 3 seasons, and it's just fabulous. It's a great put on of Star Trek, a great sort of sympathetic put on. What I've been doing this summer for fun is getting solar power installed on my house and getting a battery put in. That's a very yuppie pursuit, but if you're at all interested in it, just contact me through Twitter. I've compiled voluminous knowledge from many sources as I try to figure out all the nuances and ways of this. As far as biking goes, before the snow flies, get on your bike and go to Crosby Farm in St. Paul and thank me later. That's a wonderful ride. You can take it all the way into downtown, but Crosby Farm especially is just a beautiful place to bike through. A little bit confusing, but you'll figure it out. Or else just get your ass to the Dakota Rail Trail and out in the West Metro. Those are the 2 absolutely fabulous ones. You can also, if you're adventurous, bike the Cedar Lake Trail. It's been slowly reopening, and the part of that goes from where the Kenilworth turnoff is, that's still closed. But if you keep going west, past where Punch Pizza is in that mini mall, more and more of it is opening up, and you can get all the way out, I think, to Blake Road. And if you miss that ride, if you know the ride that I'm talking about, just take it once before winter comes. You can take it during the winter too, but most people aren't that adventurous. And it's great to feel that things reopening. It's like spring in the fall of a bike ride. So that's what makes me happy.
Thank you, David Brauer.
Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate all your work, and let's keep our fingers crossed.
Okay, this has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.